Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we have our DFS edition of the show. Hope you guys enjoyed that thrilling matchup between the Texans and Panthers last night and really got, a good long look at Davis Mills' long neck, but we are not talking about that right now. You can tune into our injury podcast. That'll be up Friday night, Saturday morning for some usage thoughts on that matchup. Today's goal is to try to help win you some money over at DraftKings. So I am joined as always on this podcast by Mr. Andrew Erickson, PFF analyst, international superstar, whatever you want to call him. Andrew, how's it going, my friend?
International superstar. I love that, man. I know that, football is getting more popular in England and across in Western Europe. So I'm happy to fill the role as the next fantasy football superstar internationally. I'll be that guy.
I love our Aussie friends. There's a big football market in Australia. I've also seen the Brazil pages go in a lot. One time, I did actually take Andrew a couple quarters of Portuguese in college. I got good grades, didn't exactly learn the language, but I remember at one point trying to interact with the Brazilian folks on Twitter, and I thought the ja, like the JA was Portuguese or something for haha, and I just got completely roasted because apparently that's an entire thing in the Spanish language, and I could be even telling the story wrong. So point of the story is I need to talk about football, not other language practices, because that is not my strength. So Andrew, as always, we will be going through the DraftKings slate, kind of giving our thoughts on the cash and tournament side of things. For those that are a little bit new to DraftKings, cash games refer to head-to-heads, double-ups, basically games that we're just trying to set the floor as high as possible. GPP, tournament games, that's when we're trying to take down, beat hundreds of thousands of people. So we got to be a little bit contrarian to try to get that goal accomplished. So Andrew, we're going to start things off with the cash lineup idea, and pretty hard to get away from Mr. Justin Fields at 5,200, huh?
I think that it's the lock button for quarterback for cash. I don't think we need to overthink it. He's very cheap at 5,200, like you said, and he's a mobile quarterback, and he's not going to be this cheap ever again in the history of DraftKings. So just play him. I don't really think it goes. I don't think it really needs to be super complicated where you're trying to figure out, which do I pay up a quarterback? Usually you want to pay up for a safe quarterback. The last 2 weeks we've been touting Jalen Hurts because he's been a rushing guy. And last week he wasn't even that good as a passer, but he got it down on the ground. And now you get a cheaper version of Jalen Hurts in Justin Fields, who's $1,200 cheaper than Jalen Hurts was last week. And it's the exact same strategy behind it. He's rushed 11 times already this season. And I just think that it makes too much sense in the preseason. He was running a lot. That's something that he was doing more than Trey Lance, which is actually why I changed them in my rankings. I actually put Justin Fields ahead of Trey Lance in my seasonal long rankings because I just thought, look, when Fields gets to play, he's going to run significantly more. The offensive line is not good for the Bears. So I just think it's too easy to go with Justin Fields, who also has the league's highest average depth of target at 10.5. And Andy Dalton, ironically, has 4.6, which is dead last in the league. So you don't only get the rushing equity, but you get a quarterback who's going to attack downfield. He's got good receivers that can win downfield with Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney. And the Browns defense does not look great. Third most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks for the past 2 weeks. PFF's 25th ranked coverage unit. So I don't see why. I think it's really simple. I think you should have confidence in starting Fields in your cash lineups.
Yeah, that's the argument I don't understand. If people really want to say, hey, in redraft, especially like Kirk Cousins, Stafford versus Fields, it's an argument. I think they're in that same tier. But this idea that we need to fade Fields because they're facing the Browns, what? I agree that this defense has gotten a lot better on paper from last year to this year. They gave up 33 to Kansas City. Everyone gives up 30 plus to Kansas City. But Tyrod Taylor and company found the end zone twice in about 20 minutes against this defense before he unfortunately suffered that hamstring injury. So yeah, there are a couple situations where defenses maybe can really, play a larger role than just a tiebreaker in rankings. This is not one of them, Andrew. And it's not even it's funny because we're using Jalen Hurts, who was, one of the worst graded quarterbacks really in our database last year as a rookie, and Taysom Hill, who, had no business ever being a starting quarterback in the NFL, I think is pretty safe to say. We're using these two horrendous examples as the floor for what Justin Fields could be. He was our highest graded college football quarterback. He has some of these stats that basically show how high his ceiling is as a passer. And we're not even worried about that. We're worried about this rushing floor, which is why we're starting him. Jalen Hurts last year, QB 11, QB 1, QB 12 in 3 starts. Taysom Hill, QB 3, QB 11, QB 7, and QB 9. So you said it, Andrew. It's that simple. When we get a cheap quarterback in line for double-digit carries, he's going to be just fine. I even think his passing production was far better last week than the box score indicated. Allen Robinson dropped a touchdown. Darnell Mooney dropped a deep pass down the sideline. And, looking ahead to the rest of our cash lineup that we want to build out, having A-Rob at 6,200, having Mooney all the way down there, I'm trying to remember where he's at in the 4K range, I believe. 43. Like, we couldn't ask for easier guys to be able to stack him with. And Fields, I don't think you have to go out of your way to necessarily stack guys with him because we have that rushing floor. But it's a very easy lineup to make. I'm not worried about the matchup. Yeah, it just makes too much sense for me. I don't even, the last 2 weeks I've had Darnold and Bridgewater, and they both performed okay. But I do think it's Fields because if you look at the other quarterbacks like we feel comfortable with, I think we have to go all the way up like to Russell Wilson at 7,600 before we find someone else that we could feasibly put in cash games. Maybe the Daniel Jones crowd out there at 5,800 has something to say with that. But yeah, I think Fields, with the price, with the rushing, and with the non-concerning matchup, all in on him in cash games. Now, Andrew, I know you got something to say about the artist known as Danny Dimes. Not in cash, though. Let's talk why you like Danny Dimes as New York Giants offensive attorneys.
I mean, what's not to like about Daniel Jones this week? PFF's second highest graded quarterback over the first 2 weeks. Yeah, no, Daniel Jones, the same guy that everyone seems to just not want to play, despite the fact that he's, playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have been the worst defense against quarterbacks this year, giving up 30 fantasy points per game to the position, or the fact that Daniel Jones, is third in rushing yards among quarterbacks. But no, I can't play Daniel Jones because he's Daniel Jones. It's like, oh, no, like play Daniel Jones. I don't get the hate for this guy who is one of the more fun fantasy players at the quarterback position. Like, he has the whole package. Like, he throws the ball downfield. He runs the ball with his legs. He has the best matchup you could humanly ever ask for. And the thing that makes him different than in like past years where people have been so hesitant to play him, and I think kind of what I'm kind of like pinpointing as the reason why he's actually been more productive, especially this season where he's already averaged, 25 fantasy points per game. He's literally a top 5 quarterback. And he did that against the Denver Broncos and the Washington football team. 2 really, really good defenses. Like, I was concerned about Jones. I was like, okay, like the first 2 weeks are going to be rough, but he gets the Falcons week 3. And I think that's a good spot, where people can kind of like buy back into Daniel Jones. Like, I was already wrong about the first 2 matchups. Like, I thought he was going to be terrible against those 2 teams. And then he just completely shocked me and was actually productive in both of those matchups because of the rushing and because he's using all of the weapons around him. Look, Jones, 23.3 fantasy points per game in 12 games played with Saquon Barkley. Last 7 games played with a healthy Sterling Shepard, 21 fantasy points per game. Like, part of the reason why he was bad last year was because he got hurt and couldn't run, and all of his weapons were hurt. Like, I still don't know how many games he's played with Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, and Sterling Shepard all on the field at the same time. Like, it's not even, you can't even count on one hand how many games that has actually happened to Daniel Jones. So I'm going to play him. I see his roster percentage. It's like at sub 2%. And I'm like, whatever, fine. I'll take the guy that they're now coining. I saw the nickname Vanilla Vic. Saw that nickname thrown out there on Twitter sphere. Don't know who said it, but that's why I'm going to play in tournaments because I think he's got sky high upside. He's got all the weapons. He's got the best matchup. He's already put the production against better defenses. So yeah, dude, Daniel Jones, man. And the only reason why people won't play him is because, well, he's Daniel Jones. Like, okay, well, PFF's second highest graded quarterback looks pretty good to me.
I wish we had some better counting numbers through the air in the past, 16 games he's been out there. We haven't seen Danny Dimes get to 3 passing touchdowns or 300 passing yards since 2019. Hey, the rushing stuff is impossible to ignore. I think Next Gen Stats told us last year he was the fastest man ever to live after he had that long run against the Eagles where he got tripped up. Yeah, man, I think it works for a tournament, particularly if the rostership is going to be low. I do just wonder if you want to take these down, like how low can you really go when we got guys like Kyler just going absolutely bonkers at the start. But yeah, I mean, it allows you to get up to Henry, to Cook, and Shepard and Gallaudet. It's similar to Fields and similar to the next guy I'm going to talk about where when you can get your quarterback, his wide receiver 1, his wide receiver 2, all for a pretty affordable price, that kind of allows you to go up and get those other studs in your lineup. So the other quarterback I'm going to talk about, don't throw up people, Jared Goff. 5,200. You know who also has been putting up some pretty good numbers this year, Andrew? Jared Goff, QB8 and QB11 in fantasy football land through the first 2 weeks. Has it been pretty? Of course not. He's been in negative comeback mode script like the entire second half, at least for the fourth quarter of that Packers game. So, and again, it's even a little bit less about Goff and more about how his targets are going. We can get him, DeAndre Swift at 5,800, TJ Hawkinson at just 5,200. Like, we're going to see Hawkinson's price get in that 6K range. He didn't get the massive, push this week from playing on Monday Night Football. But I think as we see, these Lions continue to feed him and Swift in the passing game, these guys are going to, see that price really get up there in future weeks. So it's probably our last time to take advantage of that. I think Baltimore wins, but this is just a situation, man, where they're coming off such an emotional win over the Chiefs. The defense hasn't really looked good all year because they're so banged up. If you don't have Marcus Peterson, Jimmy Smith, there's only so much Marlon Humphrey can do. So with Goff, might not be pretty, but guys, it hasn't been pretty all year, and he has been the source of some fantasy goodness. So again, Goff, Swift, Hawkinson, Jones, Shepard, Gallaudet. These are all stacks that give you some nice hidden upside and allow you to go up and get the rest of the studs that you want to try to fit in to the lineup. So Andrew, let's talk some RBs now. And before we do anything, I think we need to ask ourselves a question, because this is kind of where people lost their money last week. Is this a Derrick Henry week or not? Because if it is, we got to get there. And if it's not, then we can talk otherwise. But seeing him as a home favorite over an Indianapolis team that looks like they have no chance of keeping up on the scoreboard, Andrew, and we'll see on Dalvin Cook. He's not practicing today. That could make our life a lot easier if he ends up being ruled out for this week. Then we can go down and get Alexander Mattison and pay up a little bit easier with Derrick Henry. But what are your thoughts here on Henry this week? And why, if any reason, can you come up with, should we not be jamming him in the cash lineups?
I mean, into cash lineups, yeah, I think that if he's going to be, 20, 25% rostered, then it doesn't hurt you at all to play him. And if he only has like a mediocre game for Derrick Henry standard, or where he doesn't necessarily score, he rushes like 80 yards, that's not going to kill you. You're going to be fine. Again, if Dalvin Cook is healthy, I still prefer him because I just like his role more in the offense. I know that he's always involved in the passing game, where Derrick Henry has, it seems like it's a newfound role with him.
We got 1 week.
Yeah, we'll see if it sustains. I just kind of want to see it a little bit more before I'm like, oh, and yep, Derrick Henry, the pass catching running back for the Tennessee Titans. I just do want to see it a little bit more. And the fact that in Tulsa, like in tournaments as well, his ownership, whenever he's like if he's always sub 5%, like that's when you play him. And then he just murders everyone that doesn't play him. But then when he's much more chalky, you don't really have that leverage anymore about, why he makes such a big difference in DFS. So I think I still lean towards Cook. Like you mentioned, the injury, we'll keep that up and monitor. But, we've seen this with Dalvin Cook before where, he's on the injury report, but if he plays, like he's full go. And they're very careful to like sit him just like randomly during the season. We're like, no, like he's not good to go. So we're not playing him, take the week off, get healthy. And then we'll be back to the full workload the next week. So if he plays, I feel good about Dalvin Cook firing him back up. But if not, then yeah, I'll move up to Derrick Henry.
The other guy you wanted to talk about with the cash lineup is Mr. Austin Ekeler. Got back on the receiving box score in a major way. One of these weeks, we are going to get him having the 5+ catches and also getting the goal line carries and getting that, somewhat elusive overall RB1 finish he's been chasing this year. Man, it's one of the highest scoring games potentially between the Chargers and Chiefs. All guns up on Austin Ekeler?
Yeah, I think that he has shown us through these first 2 weeks that he's a 3 down back. Like he's involved in all facets of the game. He's gotten goal line carries, he's gotten targets, just not at the same time. But eventually those things will overlap at some point because clearly the Chargers are not enamored by Justin Jackson or Roundtree. Like, Roundtree after week 1 is like, oh, like, here's the backup. Like it's Roundtree, and people picked him up. And then it's like, oh, wait, no. Then the following week it was Justin Jackson who ended up playing more than Larry Roundtree did. So, they're not looking to get these other running backs involved. It's a concentrated target share between Ekeler, Michael Williams, Keenan Allen. So we know where the ball is going. And that's the best part about targeting these players for DFS, because we know where the touches are going. And we know that Ekeler is efficient. Like he's already rushed for 50 yards in both of his games without just averaging 12 carries per game. So like he's been efficient on the ground. He's efficient through the air. And this is a high scoring affair. Like also the Chiefs defense is not good against running backs. Like they haven't been good against running backs for like as long as I can remember, because they just don't care to try to stop the run. And Eckler's involved in the run game, even though most people know him as a pass catcher. So I'm always looking for backs that are involved in all facets. No matter how this game script goes, Chiefs get up big, Chargers get up big. Like Eckler's going to be involved no matter what. So I don't have that concern with him. So I think that's why he's worth paying up for. He's 7,200 on DraftKings in full point PPR. So I think that he has a similar ceiling to some of these 8K plus guys, but he's priced down significantly from those because he just really hasn't had that boom week where the goal line, the touchdowns and the receptions have kind of combined. So I think Ekeler is really, really safe.
So I was trying to do some projected lineups with these guys because obviously we got to make sure everyone's fitting. And if we're going with Fields and we say, hey, let's just get all the freaking running backs here, Andrew. Let's get Cook, Henry, and Ekeler in there with Fields. You can get Hawkinson. You can get Bengals D going up against a banged up Big Ben who hasn't looked good. Get the stack in with Mooney. Laviska Shenault, who despite his negative receiving yards last week is still looking like he's in line for 7 to 8 targets per game. Shoulder issue appears to be a non-issue after he started the week with a full practice. And that still gives you 4,600 to still add another guy. And maybe we even go lower than Viska, and then we can get up into the 5K range and get a little bit better receiver. So I do think it's doable to, again, pay up for all these running backs, particularly with Fields and Mooney, if you don't feel like you need to have a super high-priced wide receiver. So if you want to go that route in cash, I do think it's doable. I guess the question, though, Andrew, is do we want to do that, or do we want to replace one of those top 3 backs with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is egregiously underpriced at 4,800, or is he? I just think that in addition to the Henry question, like this Clyde question is the next big one because, my goodness, like the usage has kind of been there this year. It should result in touchdowns eventually. We're talking about the Chiefs' lead running back. My problem with Clyde is this is no longer a guy that is just getting unlucky with things. Last year, he had the goal line mishaps, and he had Le'Veon Bell come. This year, he's legit maybe been the single worst running back in the NFL by just about any metric. Dead last in PFF rushing grade, tied for 46 among 51 backs and missed tackles forced per carry, 3.3 yards per carry, 50th in yards after contact per carry. Like, when people talk about Clyde, they're usually quick to give him credit on being this elusive guy that can break tackles. He hasn't even been doing that this year. Like, it has just been horrendous. Hey, Andrew, I don't think Andy Reid's necessarily going to tell us if, Clyde is now in the doghouse for losing them the game last week. That's a possibility. We shouldn't just assume he's going to be the lead RB1 for another week. Are we just straight up fading Clyde even in cash games? Because if we're wrong on this, it's going to be leaving a lot of salary on the table that we could be spending to get up elsewhere.
I mean, if you're wrong about Edwards-Helaire, what is that going to be like? Oh, well, he scored 15 points. Is that what we're concerned about? I guess that's the thing.
Sure.
There are just other options I would rather pay than Edwards-Helaire. I mean, you hit the nail on the head talking about how inefficient he's been. He's just an afterthought in his offense. They don't need him at all. And that's kind of what we kind of should have looked at in the first place when they made the pick. It was a luxury pick. It's okay, we'll add Edwards-Helaire. Maybe he can make our offense better. Oh, well, he can't. Oh, well, whatever. We don't need him anyway. That's kind of how I feel like the Chiefs feel about him right now. Having him as a featured part of their offense doesn't matter. They don't need him. So I want to play running backs that are talked about in the game plan. Hey, we're going to do this and that with this running back. I mean, freaking Cordero Patterson. I almost feel more confident about playing him because at least I know what he's going to be involved. They're going to get him scheme him touches near the goal line. Edwards-Helaire could be oh, well, no, Darrell Williams is getting the goal line carries and you're going to just get in between the 20 tick carries that we don't really want to give to anybody else. I'm going to pass block. That's your job this week. So I'm out on CEH again. I know the 4,800 price again. It's like the elephant in the room. It's the DraftKings salary setters are all right, let's see what we can get people to pay to get CEH back into DFS lineups. And for me, it's he was a sit and my start him, sit him this week because I just don't think that, maybe he's just really not that good. Again, I also think that that ankle injury he suffered in the preseason could be a factor. I think that's important to note because again, like you mentioned, he doesn't look elusive, doesn't look explosive. And if he's hurt, then okay, then that's why. But if he's playing hurt, then we don't want to play him in DFS or in fantasy football at all. So, as gross as it sounds, I'd rather pay up to play Mike Davis or Leonard Fournette, at 5.1K, 5K, or Cordero Patterson at 4.6K, because I feel like those guys just have more juice at this point. Mike Davis's role is more defined. I know that he's going to catch passes from Matt Ryan. I don't know if ACH is going to catch passes from Mahomes. Fournette is getting involved. He's getting the love from Brady and Bruce Arians as their lead running back, 15 touches per game. So yeah, I'm out on CEH even at the cheap price tag. And if And if he burns me, like, what does that even mean? Like what is his ceiling in a game? Like, do they give the ball to running backs at the goal line? Like he could, like 15 points at the ceiling is like, okay, like I can make up for that with a receiver or one of these other running backs I mentioned.
Chiefs are tied for 25th in goal line carries to their running back since week 1. Last year, tied for 20th in receptions by their running backs. Like the days of Jamal Charles and Kareem Hunt just taking over in the passing game are over because they now have Tyreek freaking Hill and Travis Kelce to throw the ball to. The upside discussion is a very good point. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in his first career game had over 100 yards and a touchdown. That's the only time he has checked both those boxes in one game. So, yeah, I think I am team. Let's get away from Clyde and cash because we can go cheap at wide receiver in that same 4K price range. Get our Mooney, get our Visca. Emmanuel Sanders is there at 4,200. We got Tyler Boyd at 47. Beasley, Marvin Jones, like, I'm more fine pretty much with those guys, at least relative to, how we're thinking about the pricing and the position value than Clyde, particularly with the amount of advantage we can potentially get on the field if Clyde is as chalky as some of these rostership projections make him out to be. Let's talk a little GPP though. Andrew, I was off last week. Jonathan Taylor. Never mind that he has the most red zone carries, most inside the 5 carries in the league and just has 0 touchdowns. We'll take the L. It didn't work out. But what about another high-priced running back perhaps going a little bit under-owned because of all the great options around him? Yes, I'm talking about Nick Chubb at home against the Bears a week after he, didn't absolutely ball out. So I think people were disappointed. Never mind, he had like 12 touches for 98 yards and a touchdown, I believe, against the Texans. Never mind that he's arguably the single best running back in the league with the ball in his hands. Like, he's facing a Bears defense that is good. Like Roquan Smith, he's one of the true sideline-to-sideline linebackers in the league at this point. Obviously, Khalil Mack. But with Nick Chubb, it takes one freaking run, man. Before you know it, he's 80 yards down the sideline going into the end zone. So Nick Chubb as a home favorite at 7,600. I think if people are devoting that much money to their running back, they're probably just trying to get an extra 1,000, go up to Derrick Henry, even Alvin Kamara at 600 more. Or we're going down to Austin Ekeler, we just said all those nice things about, or even lower to Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley. So I think Nick Chubb is in that sweet spot where people might get off him. They're a little too annoyed about the Kareem Hunt involvement there, which is fair, but we're still looking at a back that has legit 200-yard and multiple touchdown upside. We said, where's the upside with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? We know Nick Chubb has it, and the fact that he does seem to be this week's potential Derrick Henry. Last week, I thought the Derrick Henry guy was going to be Jonathan Taylor. So wrong on that, but I do think Nick Chubb fits that same prototype for what we're potentially looking for. And the other guy I would just note, what easier way to get away from Clyde, Andrew, than to go up just $100 and get Javonte Williams, who looks like the better running back. He has the better matchup against the Jets, and the touch projection really isn't all that different. We're both looking at, around 15 probably combined carries and targets and more, simulations than not. So very excited that we can have both of the PFF's top 2 running backs and missed forced broken tackles per carry as great GPP plays this week. So getting off of Clyde, going up to Javonte, getting off of, Ekeler and Henry and going just right in that middle spot to Nick Chubb, I think makes a lot of sense in tournaments. Are you with me?
Yeah, I like the Javonte one specifically. I think that's a good pivot off of the chalky CEH because their touch share, their projections are probably going to be pretty similar. And if that's the case, then you just pick the guy that's better. And at this point, it looks like Javonte Williams is better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire because, again, we talk about usage a lot and it's very important, but there is a factor of talent. And when you play bad, like that's the easiest chalk to fade is the bad chalk, like players that are bad, that are chalky, like 3K receivers that we don't know anything about that become like 30% owned because they're filling in for a superstar. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to play that guy because he's not good. Like it was the whole reason to fade Russell Gage this season because he's just not good. And now he's hurt, and yeah.
Uncalled for shot at Russell Gage, but that aside, let's go through some of your favorite guys. So I like your Saquon Barkley pick here, just 6,500. All the nice things you said about Daniel Jones' matchup against the Falcons also apply to Saquon. Lost in the disappointing Thursday night performance last week was the fact that his snaps got back over that 80% threshold, and we're now expecting a more well-rested, potentially just better health version of Saquon Barkley in his best matchup of the season as a home favorite. So definitely with you on Saquon there. Talk to me about Leonard Fournette, though, someone that hasn't found the end zone yet this year because Tom Brady wants to throw 60 touchdowns. But hey, man, a lot of points to be scored. And basically everything I spelled out last week for why I like Jonathan Taylor, just, as good as Aaron Donald and Ramsey are, the Rams aren't exactly a defense that just continuously hold opposing running backs to 20 yards like the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason they invite the run in. They don't stack the box. It's actually them and the Los Angeles Chargers that have the least amount or the least rushing attempts faced with 8 men or more in the box. So they have a lot of light boxes, and that's where Fournette's been really good this year. If you look at his PFF rushing grade against light boxes, only Nick Chubb has a higher PFF rushing grade. And to kind of bring back Edward Solaire into this conversation, it's interesting because both LA teams do not stack the box, except Clyde Edwards-Helaire against light fronts is PFF's second worst graded running back. So even with the Chargers, you look at the matchup, it's like, oh, the Chargers give up, the most rushing yards to running backs this year. Oh, that's great. Like fire up CH. It's like, yeah, but that's because they've done it because they've faced good running backs. Like that's why. So I think that Fournette, he's looked good. Like he is actually graded really well for PFF. I think he's PFF's 6th highest graded rusher so far this season. So, I mean, I've been impressed with what I've seen from him out of the gates. He's involved in the passing game. He has 9 catches on 11 targets through 2 weeks of play. And I think that it's weird because Fournette's the only guy that Bruce Arians didn't pump up at all during this offseason. And that should have been the indication that he was the target the entire time. He escaped the Bruce Arians death kiss, which is basically like, Keyshawn Vaughn breakout, done. Giovanni Bernard, massive role, done. Ronald Jones starter, done. But he never said anything about Fournette. And of course, that's why Fournette is the best fantasy option in that backfield at 5K. I like him a lot. You talked about the touchdowns. Like Tom Brady's not going to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns every single week. Sorry. Like it's not going to happen. I've seen so much Tom Brady where you think it's just going to happen every single week. It's not, especially against the Rams defense that has a strong secondary. So if they're not going to be scoring of this projected total of 55.5 points, they're not scoring through the air. They're going to score through the ground, which means Leonard Fournette could see double-digit touchdowns or multiple touchdowns in this game. So Fournette at 5K, I think he has really high upside, which I don't think Edwards-Helaire has. And I think he still has that stigma on him about, Fat Lenny, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, we've seen like extensive, like going back to last year of him being the lead back and being really, really productive. So I like Leonard Fournette, and this comes from a person, an analyst that was not high on him entering the season. So I'm trying to change my view after what I've seen over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, with Fournette and Zeke and some of these other guys, like if you just kind of looked at them more as just a running back instead of, oh, look at this former number 4 overall pick and the contracts and all this, I think people would, be a little bit more kind when assessing their skills. Let's move on to some wide receiver talk. So I will just say, if we're going with the high-priced running back approach, if we want Fields, I do think it's very doable to stack Fields with Allen Robinson, just 6,200. Again, should have had 2 touchdowns last week. We were expecting him to catch that ball 9 times out of 10. Unfortunately, we had that one instance occur in Fields' first extended appearance. And also Darnell Mooney right there. And we're talking about one of the more condensed passing games in the NFL between A-Rob and Mooney. So I think that's very doable. If you don't want to go A-Rob, Chris Godwin, I think, is fair game. He is the most, well-positioned Buccaneers receiver in terms of just expecting consistency. Antonio Brown was great in week 1, busted in week 2. Evans was busted in week 1, great in week 2. Godwin was the one that was fairly consistent, putting up numbers in both. So I think that's fine. Not anticipating him seeing a ton of Jalen Ramsey. Maybe he'll see more than last year. They did have Ramsey shadow Mike Evans last year. But Ramsey also plays a lot in the slot, so obviously the Rams are allowed to change their strategy this time around. I am anticipating Ramsey spending most of his time across from Evans, though. And also, I think these Jaguars receivers, like Marvin Jones at 4,900, he scored twice this year and really looks like the Jaguars' number 1 receiver at this point. And Laviska Shenault at 4,400 just to get those targets. Again, I know these aren't the absolute sexiest names, guys, but this is what we need to do to go get Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook and Austin Ekeler into the lineup. We can't just, put the top 2 guys at every single position in this spot. That's why the salary cap exists for a reason. So that's if we're going Fields. Obviously, though, that's if we're really paying off a running back. Obviously, though, Andrew, people could go down to the Najee Harris, the Saquon Barkley, even the Leonard Fournette tier. Maybe even some Clyde Edwards-Helaire truthers out there that then would allow you some extra salary relief. So if you're having a cash lineup with some extra salary to spend at wide receiver, which guys are you trying to prioritize?
I think the top of the list for me would be, if I'm going like elite wide receiver, it'd be Tyreek Hill, because I think that he's still seeing that high end usage that we want. And it's really interesting because like DeAndre Hopkins, so they're the two most expensive guys at above 8K. And Hopkins is not like, his target's like not there. Like he's not seeing like this massive target volume that we've always seen him every single year. And I remember talking about that last year about Hopkins, like, oh, he's going to have competition for the first time. And I was like totally wrong. And now we're kind of starting to see that a little bit more this year. I mean, he only has, I think it's around a 17% target share on the season. I mean, he's being out targeted by Rondale Moore. Like I get that that's not going to always be the case. Like, yes, Hopkins is probably going to finish the season with more targets than Rondale Moore. I don't think that's a hot take whatsoever.
Hot take from Andrew.
But the fact of the matter is that someone's even like in the range, because usually it's always been him like versus the field. Like it hasn't even been close. So the fact that it is starting to condense a little more, where you have Tyreek Hill, who's even after basically a dud last week, he's still sitting at 28% target share, which is 9th in the NFL, and then a 42% air yard share, which is 7th. Like he's so locked and loaded, and especially him coming off like an off game. Like I always want to be on Tyreek Hill after he has a bad game. So I think of the high end receivers, like if you're going to pay up, I think the Tyreek Hill would be my play over someone like DeAndre Hopkins. And then going down a little bit further, I think Diggs is in a really good spot. You know, the Bills have kind of underwhelmed over the first 2 weeks, but they played really good defenses. So I like Diggs. And then in the 6K range, I mean, Cooper Kupp should really be way more expensive than he is. 37% target share over the past 2 weeks. And there's like no reason to think that his role is going to change anytime soon. Like Matthew Stafford, like it's a brand new. So I know that we went into the season thinking, okay, like it's going to be Kupp, it's going to be Woods. And like, those are going to be the top two guys, but this is a new quarterback. Like that was true with Jared Goff. So I think we're being kind of too slow to adapt to like Kupp is like the alpha in this offense. Like I'm almost willing to like buy into Kupp as almost like a buy high in season long wings, where we're looking at 2021's version of last year's Davante Adams or the year before Michael Thomas, where this dude just always hits no matter what. So I think he's still priced too low at 6,800. Again, we saw the targets go back to Woods last week, but also continue to go to Cooper Kupp at 37%, like back-to-back weeks. Like that's not an anomaly. It's going to continue to happen. Like why would it change? Like there's no one coming back into this offense. Like Tyler Higbee, Robert Woods are like nice options, but Matthew Stafford's continuing to feed Kupp, and Kupp is so schematically used by Sean McVay that's never going to change. Like he's just not going to not continue to see targets, especially against Todd Bowles. You look at the last 2 times he's played a Todd Bowles-led defense, averages 10 catches and 133 receiving yards per game in the 2 games he's played Tampa Bay, where Todd Bowles has been the defensive coordinator. So Kupp seems just like absolutely locked and loaded. Like I get people might feel, oh, I missed out on the 40-point game last week. Like I can't go back to it now. I got to pay up a little bit more. But it's like, he's still too cheap. Like I think you should go right back to Cooper Kupp if you have the funds. And then the same thing goes for Mike Williams. Like, again, I think Keenan Allen is the number 1 receiver, but the past 2 weeks, that has not been the case. It has been the Mike Williams show in Los Angeles. He's led the team in target share. And this is going back to the fact where it's a new coaching staff. They told us that Mike Williams is going to see more targets as the X, as the Michael Thomas in his offense. And so far, 2 weeks through the season, that's literally what's been happening. So I think we need to start to kind of lowering our projections on Keenan Allen just a bit, increasing the gap with Mike Williams, because I think it's a lot closer than the prices would kind of indicate here. So at 61, I'm going right back to Mike Williams, who's actually coming in with really, really low ownership. I don't know why. I mean, they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs and, a 55-point under over game. So he's really cheap there at 6.12 as well. So I like Mike Williams in that 6K range.
I love how we have, I won't name names, but many people on fantasy Twitter trying to victory lap their preseason draft strategies after 2 weeks of action. And we have polar opposites, basically just picking and choosing like 5 players and just ignoring the rest of the thing. So if you're a robust RB truther, the hot stat is that none of the top 6 wide receivers in PPR are scoring. Kupp, Lockett, Debo, Thielen, Cooper, Williams were drafted before pick 41. But you can also be a 0 RB truther and say that through 2 weeks, Cordero Patterson, Tony Pollard, and James White are all top 10 RBs in PPR scoring. Andrew, like, why didn't people just pick the best players in their drafts? Like, I don't get it. How come, how come everyone just didn't avoid Jonathan Taylor and just pick the absolute right guy every time? Infuriating. Like, if you're victory lapping, you're just going to piss off the fantasy football karma gods. That's all it comes down to. And, just try to freaking do fair analysis. It pisses me off. Sorry, had to get that off my chest. Back to the DFS side of things. Let's talk some more tournament plays here, because I saw your list. I like the Kenny Gallaudet call. That's a fairly easy one to stack with Daniel Jones. We got the squeaky wheel situation occurring after Gallaudet just, did all of us a favor and was screaming at Jason Garrett on the sideline last week. I would say, though, a couple other guys, I think KJ Hamler at 3,600 is perfect for tournaments. If you look down on that list, every week there's a handful of sub 4K receivers that I think people, really get into. This week we have Quintez Cephas starting to get some steam at 3,900. KJ Osborne 100 below. Hamler's getting a lot of love. Van Jefferson, who just had a 90% plus snap rate, he's getting some love, and even Mecole Hardman at 3,900. Hamler's the one that I don't really see getting the same sort of potential rostership. And yeah, like Tim Patrick got the touchdown last week. Cortland Sutton dominated air yards and everything, but that was just a 1 week sample. That's not guaranteed to be the way moving forward. We saw Hamler get that every down roll now that Judy was out of the picture. And hey, man, like 2 weeks ago, he dropped a 50-yard touchdown. In the preseason game with Drew Lock, he caught one. Like, this is a guy that we know has actual multi-touchdown, multiple long touchdown upside in his potential range of outcomes. So love KJ Hamler. Hey, let's get these Broncos guys no one's paying attention to. It's been a good offense this year. And my last point would be, a guy that I loved last week didn't quite pay off, but Chase Claypool, particularly if Deontay Johnson is out, I think makes a lot of sense. I know Ben hasn't looked good, but that hasn't stopped him from getting Claypool a shit ton of air yards. He was one of only 5 receivers last week with over 100 unrealized air yards. Maybe we need to call them prayer yards with Big Ben. I get it. But if you watch that game, like, a lot of the problem for Claypool was having to go up against Casey Hayward, who is PFF's #1 highest graded cornerback right now. Like, Ben had some terrible plays, but there were also just these jump ball situations where Claypool wasn't able to win. He is someone that I do think is more talented than your normal receiver, and to still see him under 6K. Again, like we're looking, like you said with Clyde, we want players that we know have this multiple touchdown, over 100-yard upside. We know for a fact Claypool does possess that. So also just, yeah, and we say this every week, but I think it still applies. It's always going to be easier to pay up at running back and pay down at wide receiver. So merely by reversing that, I think helps you make some contrarian lineups. We got Nyheim Hines, Javonte Williams, even James White, Leonard Fournette, and Mike Davis. Like, we have a good group of backs that aren't even priced higher than 5,200 that we can go fill out the RB spots and then go pay up more out wide receiver. So as always, I think that applies. But yeah, Hamler, Claypool, for me, are 2 other good tournament shots. But Andrew, talk to me a little bit about Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, and DK Metcalf. Some studs that we just haven't seen be quite as studly in the year 2021.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson, it's weird because it's KJ Osborne. He's like stealing all the touchdowns and all the big plays that we usually would go to Justin Jefferson, but Jefferson's still seeing a ton of air yards, and it's the boom matchup. It's the back and forth matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. We know that Justin Jefferson broke out this time last year in week 3. He had a massive game against the Tennessee Titans. So yeah, all the peripheral metrics are there for Justin Jefferson. We know he's super talented. It's a high scoring game. And I love going to him in tournaments, and I love bringing it back with DK Metcalf. And this is the thing with DK Metcalf. It's another Patrick Peterson matchup. That's the thing people are going to bring up. They're going to talk about how, oh no, here we go, Patrick Peterson once again. Last year, he only held him to 5 catches for 69 yards. Nice. 1 touchdown on 9 targets.
I'm getting mad with you mocking it, Andrew. I know you're not serious. It's still making me mad.
Well, that's the thing. Like, that's going to be, the reason why people, and also Lockett's been playing better. You just have like all these things thrown together. And it's like, look, yes, in the past, Patrick Peterson has had DK Metcalf's number. And yes.
No, he hasn't. Russell Wilson has been afraid of throwing it his way, which is dumb, but it's because he's been in that division.
Yeah. So regardless, the production hasn't always been there because of Patrick Peterson or whatever, him covering him not forcing the ball to him with Russell Wilson. Either way, it's a reason why people won't want to play DK Metcalf. And the fact that he's also not been as good as Tyler Lockett, but just seeing his like price underneath Lockett, I don't know. I just get that kind of, I tweeted out like a gif of the Michael Jordan thing with DK Metcalf's face on Michael Jordan being like, and I took that personally because he's cheaper than Tyler Lockett now. And we know that DK Metcalf is the superior player to Lockett. As good as Lockett is, we know that from a talent perspective. I think that Metcalf just has that higher ceiling. And I think he can have a boom week. I'm going to bet on this uber talented gargantuan wide receiver against a 31-year-old cornerback every single day of the week, including Sundays, especially with Russell Wilson, at quarterback. So the rostership has Lockett as the more rostered Seahawks wide receiver. And I think that makes sense, but that's why I want to go to Metcalf. Like, most of the time we really only see one of these Seattle receivers boom. And the first 2 weeks has been Lockett both times. But the target share has been basically even across the board. It's just been Lockett's just been getting those big plays and getting those air yards, where last year Metcalf led the team in air yards. So I think that we're going to see it kind of reverse a little bit, go back to Metcalf. And I'm going to bet that Metcalf can beat Patrick Peterson. Like, sorry if that's a hot take. Like Patrick Peterson, when Patrick Peterson was targeted last week, he gave up a perfect passer rating, 158.3. Like, he's not some like stud. He's way past his prime. So I have no problem going back to Metcalf, especially when he is lower rostered than his teammates. So I like going with him.
Yes. Great stuff. I just want to continue to get stuff off my chest here. I think Metcalf should, you said last week, and I think he had 8 catches for 80 yards. Last week, you were saying like every tournament lineup, let's get CeeDee Lamb in there. I think that needs to be DK Metcalf this week. Okay, Peterson has quote-unquote shut him down. In those 4 matchups, Metcalf has received 4 targets, 1 target, 5 and 5. Now, we need to consider that, but people, these are completely different defenses. That was with Peterson legit shadowing Metcalf. In 2 games with the Vikings, they have not moved Peterson away from his spot as the left cornerback. You know who's been shown on the other side of the field? PFF's single worst cornerback, Bashaud Breeland, who actually made A.J. Green look like anything other than dust for the first time in maybe 3 years. So through 2 weeks, Bashaud Breeland and Patrick Peterson have been targeted 19 times. They have allowed 15 receptions, 266 yards, 5 touchdowns. They are yet to touch a pass between them in terms of interceptions or pass breakups. Like, this is the matchup to target. DK Metcalf needs to be in your tournament lineups of all shapes and sizes. Hit me up with some AJB goodness, Andrew. He let us down. Let us down last week. But I
appreciate the backup there, Ian, with the DK Metcalf. I love it. Hitting it home. With AJ Brown, look, again, he's had a case of the dropsies. It's okay. It's not a reason to panic because drops are not predictive. And it's a past performance. And it doesn't matter. Like, we talk about this with Deontay Johnson all the time. Like, Deontay Johnson is really good. And that's why he drops the ball, because he gets open all the time. And look, that's why AJ Brown's left a lot of production on the field. He has 3 drops this season. 2 of them have come on like 20-yard pass plays down the field. So he's actually like missed out on a lot of big plays. But we know that that's not predictive. We know he's averaging 8 targets per game, which is really what matters over 2 straight weeks, which is pretty high for AJ Brown standards. And he still has tons of air yards, 16th highest air yard share in the NFL. And if you look at the 2 highest scoring players the last 2 weeks, it's been Tyler Lockett and Cooper Kupp. What do they have in common? They both played the Indianapolis Colts, who just happens to be the defense AJ Brown is going against this week. Both of those guys operate out of the slot a lot of the time. And AJ Brown has seen half of his targets when lined up in the slot this season. So we know that Brown has big play upside, and we know that it's usually going to be kind of similar to the way that Seattle operates. You know, it's usually going to be AJ Brown week or Julio Jones week. Last week was Julio Jones with the bigger week. So I expect it to be AJ Brown. I mean, at 6.4K, like, I mean, that's way, 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 way too cheap. I'm going right back to AJ Brown. I know he let us down last week, but I don't think he's going to do it 2 weeks in a row. This is the biggest AJ Brown podcast in the universe. He will not let us down.
People always have these, like, they write off AJB after one bad game. I'm old enough to remember last year when he dropped that 70-yard touchdown against the Colts, and people were legitimately afraid to play him in the next Indy matchup because of that. And, like, by the time the first quarter was over, he had one of those patented, 10-yard crosser that he then busts for a 70-yard score and just erases everyone's pursuit angle. So all the AJB and Metcalf. Let's talk a little bit about tight end. Yeah, I can thank James O'Shaughnessy for freaking losing me a lot of money last week.
He was going to hit too. He was so going to hit. Oh my God.
And 3 snaps. He played 3 snaps and he actually didn't goose egg. He gave us a 24-yard catch. I almost wish he would have goose egged. It would have been easier to deal with. I'm just kidding. I know he got hurt. I hope James is okay. He is on an injured reserve now. Just frustrating when, you get that bad play. Because a lot of times we do overthink the sub 3K tight end. It felt right. It made it so easy to do everything else. That's why, maybe differentiating the exposure a little bit instead of too high makes sense sometimes with plays like that. But anyway, looking at this week real quick, if you can get up to Waller or Kelsey, I get it. That's always going to be a good call. I don't think you need to unnecessarily. Famous last words, I get it. But with Hawkinson at 5,200 people, this is the Monday night discount of him. Just really, he shouldn't be priced below 6K in my opinion. 11 targets, 9 targets. The guy has caught 8 passes in both of these first games and scored in each. And to really be afraid of a Ravens defense that is going to give him man coverage, the same man coverage that led to Derek Carr targeting Waller like 60 times in week 1, is going to be there for Hawkinson. So with that said, the tight end on the other side of the ball, Marky Andrews, also is well overdue for a touchdown at this point. Andrew, I know you have some things to say about Mark Andrews. The final notes I'll add, though, if you want to get cheap, we don't have our 2,700 James O'Shaughnessy this week. We do have Austin Hooper at 3,600. Like, we're just going to see. When we saw last year, they had that COVID game where none of the wide receivers were healthy. That's like what we're getting closer to at this point, because OBJ won't confirm he's going to play. Jarvis Landry is on injured reserve. You know, it's always a little bit of a who's going to get the catches between Bryant, Njoku, and Hooper. But I do think Hooper is the best bet here at 3,600. But you can also even go lower and get to Gerald Everett at just 3K. I actually saw his usage improve last week despite not finding the end zone. We're looking at a game between the Vikings and Seahawks, expecting to score all sorts of points. And I wouldn't be shocked, Andrew, if Gerald Everett ends up emerging as this offense's number 3 pass game option. Like, the numbers between Metcalf and Lockett are so bonkers right now. Like, they have combined for 87% of the Seahawks air yard share through 2 weeks. Like, that's not gonna be that high continues. Someone else has to catch the ball eventually, and it can't always be Freddie Swain on a completely blown coverage. So Everett, I think, makes a lot of sense at 3K to get exposure to that high scoring format and hopefully some Russell Wilson goodness. But Andrew, talk to me about your namesake in reverse, Mark Andrews.
Yes. So Marky Andrews, I think the matchup is really good for him. He's still seeing, a lot of targets in the offense. He's still running a high amount of routes. His 91% route run per dropback rate is second among all tight ends, only to Logan Thomas. So he's out there, he's running routes, and it's just been the Marquise Brown show the last couple of weeks. And that's how sometimes things work especially when you're in a low volume passing offense with like the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that we're going to see targets start to reverse a little bit more to Mark Andrews. And the Lions have just sucked against tight ends this year. Again, 158.3 passer rating when targeted. Tight ends have, it's perfect. You literally cannot go wrong targeting tight ends against the Lions. So I think Mark Andrews is in a good bounce back spot here. I think obviously I would want to find the funds for TJ Hawkinson because I think his targets, especially in PPR, are more stable than Andrews, who I think has more upside potentially with touchdowns. He's, scores twice, has a big long gain. I think that gives him an advantage in tournaments. And then I want to hit on the other tight ends you mentioned there as well. I agree. I think Austin Hooper, we saw his target share jump from 10% to 23% last week. Obviously, Jarvis Landry played like 2 or 3 snaps, and then Hooper was way more involved in the offense. And Gerald Everett, I think he is like the play at tight end that you can feel really good about because people are going to be off of him because they only saw 1 target. It's like, oh, that sucks. Like, he's not involved. But the usage is just absolutely bonkers for Gerald Everett. Like, he's up there with the other tight ends that run routes at such a high rate. It goes Logan Thomas, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Tyler Higbee, Hawkinson, Kelsey Pitts, CJ Uzomah, George Kittle, Gerald Everett, and then Noah Fant. So he's running routes, and Russell Wilson is one of the most uber efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. Like only good things can happen when you're running a route and Russell Wilson is dropping back to throw. Only good things can happen to your tight end. It's not a case of James O'Shaughnessy where we have no idea what's going to happen when Trevor Lawrence drops back to throw the ball. We know good things are going to happen the minute that the ball leaves Russell Wilson's hands. And if Everett just has to compete with Metcalf and Lockett, and he's that third option because he's now kind of outpacing Will Dissly based on what we saw last week, I really like that call at 3K. But I would be hard pressed to not talk about my next Irish named tight end. Week one was James O'Shaughnessy. Week 2 is Jack Doyle for the Indianapolis Colts. Because Jack Doyle ran 34 routes last week, 8 targets, 51 receiving yards. He outsnapped Mo Alley-Cox 48-27. He's cheap, and I don't feel afraid to jam him in. Look, they're going to have to go somewhere with whoever the quarterback is going to have to check it down to somebody. And it's not going to be to Michael Pittman.
That part kind of matters, Andrew.
I like Jack Doyle. Again, I've chased routes run for so long with these fringier tight ends, and it seems to work for the most part. So I like Jack Doyle. And then, like I mentioned as well, Uzomah is also running a route on a ton of Joe Burrow's dropbacks, 76%, which is top 10 in the NFL. And he's even cheaper than Gerald Everett. He's at 2.7K. So if you really want to dumpster dive, Uzomah is out there on the field all the time at 11 personnel as the tight end. Steelers obviously have a good defense, so I don't think you're going to get a lot from him, but he's really, really cheap. And if you really want to pay up at the other positions, I think Uzomah is probably the lowest you can go without wanting to like kind of like throw up a little bit when you're looking at your lineup.
Jack Doyle is just such like the quintessential like Jason Witten like 16-year Jason Witten, just catch the ball, fall forward. I get it. He could make me look dumb and find his way into the end zone once or twice, just like any of these guys.
I just said 8 targets, man. Like it's just like you don't just I don't know. Especially because it wasn't like that in week 1. Like something changed.
So why should so is Nyheim Hines going to have just one target like every game moving forward? I don't think so. I know they don't play the same position. we can both agree Gerald Everett is the cheap tight end play.
Yeah. He definitely has the most upside because he's attached to Russell Wilson and agreed.
Okay, at least we can agree. Quickly on the defenses, I think it's pretty straightforward. We can get the Bengals at just 2,100. Look, we're just trying to get the cheapest defense possible that doesn't completely suck, that has a good matchup. So yeah, they're in Pittsburgh, but if you guys have watched even a couple snaps of the Steelers offense this year, been fairly brutal. That's why, even Najee, as cheap as he is, not someone that absolutely needs to be jammed in. That's why Claypool is more of a tournament play. Got to feel good about the Bengals there. The Titans facing either a banged up version of Wentz or Brett Hundley or Jacob Eason. Got to love that there at 27, or excuse me, where are the Titans at? Yeah, 2,400, even cheaper. And the Raiders facing Jacoby Brissett. I don't think you need to go all the way up to the Raiders. Credit to Max Crosby. He's having an incredible start to the season. But Cincy or Tennessee, I think, is giving you the better kind of quarterback matchup. I don't think Jacoby is as bad as he kind of looked last week. Just a rough spot for him. He's usually a little bit more of a game manager type talent. I don't think is necessarily the sort of atrocious backup quarterback we need to be targeting. Only other points I would bring up here. Cardinals get Trevor Lawrence. He's been awful this year. And I think, in tournaments, paying up a little bit off of these cheap guys could differentiate it a little bit with that same thing in mind. Cleveland, I think, makes a lot of sense. As much as we're not worried about them, Andrew, Fields has that same issue that he had in the preseason, that he had at Ohio State. Quote unquote issue. It's just kind of the way he plays. Sometimes he's holding the ball so long. We could still see Fields put up good numbers, good rushing numbers, throw for a touchdown or two, and take a bunch of sacks from Myles Garrett and company. And then finally, if you can find a way, people, maybe just in these contrarian Javonte Williams lineups, go up and get the Denver Broncos defense against an injured version of Zach Wilson, who just, looked pretty shell-shocked for large durations of last week. So the longer we can take advantage of Zach Wilson looking like a rookie, the better, I believe. So before I throw it over to you, Andrew, for your favorite stack, I just wanted to hammer home my main 3 points that I think I found while really looking through the salaries today. So yeah, Javonte over Clyde Edwards-Helaire to avoid that chalk, better player, better matchup with same sort of touch projections. That's my top point. Second one is I do believe my favorite sub 4K receiver is KJ Hamler. You're avoiding Osborne, Van Jefferson, Cole, guys looking chalkier. We're still getting a top 3 pass game option, arguably same upside, and a very winnable matchup against the Jets. And then again, if Deontay is out, I do think Chase Claypool at 5,800. I just think he's such a talented receiver. If we can see him getting 10 targets more easily than usual, I do think in an easier matchup this week compared to last, he could cash those in. I mean, he might get shadowed by Eli Apple, Andrew. We're seeing Eli Apple, I think, emerge as kind of this year's later career Janoris Jenkins, the Josh Norman, even Patrick Peterson in certain matchups, the cornerback that we just want to fire up receivers whenever they are facing him. So that
cornerback we want our receivers to be shadowed by.
Exactly. I think that could be Eli Apple at this point. So if Claypool can get that matchup, I think he could do huge things with it. I get the Steelers' concerns. That's why it's a tournament pick that we're trying to take down. So Andrew, now let's talk your favorite game stack, Giants, Falcons.
Yeah, Giants Falcons. I think that you can stack up this game and get bits and pieces of parts of some of those other high total games, because I just think that we could see some fireworks with Daniel Jones, Kenny Gallaudet, Saquon Barkley. You can bring it back with Calvin Ridley or Kyle Pitts. A lot of good options there. Ridley's going to have a good game eventually. He's too good of a player, too heavily involved in the offense to just not to basically just kind of put up underwhelming fantasy numbers. I get Matt Ryan has not been good, and that's due in part just Matt Ryan may not be the same guy anymore. But if he's still seeing the volume, he's still seeing the targets in the offense, he's still seeing downfield looks, not as often as we like from Matt Ryan. But I do think that the Giants is a good contrarian stack. and you can add, they're also not expensive. So then if you go with the Giants, you can add in skinny stacks. So you can do a Metcalf, Justin Jefferson type of skinny stack with the Seahawks and Vikings. You can figure out how to pay up for Tyreek Hill and Mike Williams in another skinny stack. So you can get those really high priced wide receivers. Cause I think that's really the main takeaway with tournaments is you need 4 wide receivers. Like you need the 4 receivers that just boom, or at least 3 of them that, cause it's so much easier for receivers to get 40 points than running backs. Like it literally took Derrick Henry 40 touches to get to 50 points. Like that's just so absurd to happen. Like just running backs just don't get that ever. Whereas we've now seen back-to-back weeks where a wide receiver has put up 40 points. And so finding that guy, identifying that player, was Tyreek Hill week 1. Last week was Cooper Kupp. Like finding that player in the high total game, I think kind of gives you the best shot of winning a tournament. Then you kind of have the other pieces fall into place. So yeah, I like the Giants Falcons stack.
Few quick injury notes that have come through as the pod has progressed. Dalvin Cook sitting again on Thursday with the ankle issue. DeAndre Hopkins not practicing, not exactly something new for him. Elijah Mitchell absent. We could be seeing Trey Sermon week slowly but surely coming to fruition. Kenny Gallaudet earned a limited tag on Thursday. Lamar Jackson's absence, at first reported to be his hip from flipping into the end zone, apparently just a stomach bug, so we're feeling a little bit better about that. And yeah, so make sure you all tune in to myself and Dwayne McFarland, usually Andrew, but he's got some wedding shenanigans to go get to. We'll be breaking down all the injuries that get released on Friday afternoon and really, just tuning up everything we said here in DFS and everything we said throughout the week in redraft land as well. So obviously, one injury or two can, as Peter Overset likes to put it, turn the slate over on its head, flip the slate on its head. There we go. And, we try to keep you up to date with all of that stuff. But Andrew, you came to me on Monday, I believe. You said, I want to talk some prop bets. So the floor is yours, my friend. We got Andrew's big 3 prop bets of the week, critically acclaimed, in international markets all over the world. Let me know what you're feeling this week, Andrew.
All right. So you can check out the article that'll it'll be out already on the website. It's Prize Picks. I'm doing it with Ben Brown. So far, I'm in the lead because all of my unders have hit for running backs because all the running backs I picked have gone inactive those 2 weeks. So Zach Moss, Josh Jacobs hitting the unders on those guys because I haven't played when I took the unders. So shout out to me. This week, the under for running back is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So fingers crossed that even suits up this week. Under 54.5 rushing yards. I'm taking the under on Edwards-Helaire. I've already talked about how I'm fading him in DFS in redraft leagues. So yeah, I'm going to go do the trifecta and fade him in the prop bet here as well. I'm going to go Austin Ekeler with the over 53.5 rushing yards. He's already hit that over twice this season. We've already seen his share of the rushing attempts grow in this offense. They're shying away, and the Chiefs have been a terrible run defense this year, allowing 5.7 yards per carry. So I like Ekeler with the over against a bad Chiefs run defense. And then Leonard Fournette, over 21.5 receiving yards. Is he playing on third down? No. But is he getting targeted on first and second down? Yes. So that's why I like Fournette. He's been over that total the past 2 weeks. And I just think that they're starting to lean on him more and more. The Rams have good cornerbacks. So I do think that they're going to try to feature the tight end and the running backs more in the passing game. So I like Leonard Fournette over 21.5 receiving yards.
People, he has not missed these all year on this podcast. Has he given them out this year on the podcast? No, but hey, we'll hold you accountable when you come back next week. So great stuff, Andrew. And before we get out of here, people, I just want to note that week 2 of football is in the books. Now it's time to review the tape and get ready for week 3 with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off another action-packed week, DraftKings is giving new customers $150 instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Listen up because you don't want to miss this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to receive $150 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania. Only new customers. Only minimum $5 deposit. $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Also want to note the Fantasy Football Podcast is sponsored by Western Southern Financial Group. Are you focused on your roster moves? Western Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, plan to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Western Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. So team up to identify your needs and address your goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Andrew, you mentioned you got the prize picks coming out. I believe you have a great start sit column on the docket as well. What else can people find from you at PFF.com?
The DFS cheat sheet is up. on the site live. So you can go and check out all of my ideas, my mindset, game theory, everything behind DFS that I was able to kind of just write into words in 5,000 words or less, because that's what the editors have me capped at. So I can't go above it, or they just stop editing and then it just doesn't happen. So I just kind of throw all my thoughts in, the plays I like. I'm dabbling in the graphs again. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff, and hopefully I can use it to win some money this week.
So that's how your workout conversation went. I do not have a cap. That's how my workout conversation went. I love our editors, and they have so much to freaking do. I don't blame them with that. I guess my argument and I've seen, I won't name names, but certain fantasy analysts have gone out and said, oh, we shouldn't be doing long form writing anymore. Today's age is all about quicker takes and all that. I do think condensing your content into the most digestible form is important, but I think what a lot of people don't realize is watching the games, writing 10,000 words about this stuff makes you more knowledgeable about the stuff, because you have to answer more questions, do more work. Please don't rationalize to yourself that why you shouldn't do something if it's something that is just going to cause more work for yourself. If it makes you better, you probably should do it. I know it's easy to take the easier path out sometimes and try to tell yourself that, no, this is actually better. There is a time where working smarter, not harder applies. But again, I think sometimes that phrase and other people with that mindset are just trying to make an excuse for not putting in the hard work. So that's my life advice for the episode. Great stuff from Andrew, as always. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. Check out all my content as well, PFF.com. If you guys want to read one article from me a week, if you're into, reading like the kids used to do, please check out my mismatch manifesto. It's free. You guys don't have to pay for it. How about that? And I basically take my favorite single notes from the behind the paywall quarterback, running back, and wide receiver articles, put them in one with some cool charts along the way, and I think you'll learn more than a few things. And I got pretty quirky with it, because it's the last article I write every week. So like by that point, like I'm just brain dead, and I'm just kind of throwing some references around, and we see what comes to the table. I'd say it's a little bit more like my Twitter than a usual article if you're into that kind of thing. So thank you as always for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, and for Andrew, I'm Ian. Until next time, take care, everybody.